Hi, I'm Stan Garber, one of the co-founders and presidents of Levelpath. I'm with.
Sarah Toomey, head of finance here at Levelpath. I spent more than a decade building procurement teams for companies like Anaplan, Levi's, The Gap, and today I'm with Levelpath.
We're excited to have you here. Now, today, what we're going to talk about, Sarah, we're going to break down three things here. We're going to talk about, one, your role with finance, but your past with procurement. How do they work together? We're going to talk about what in AI, what's working in the real world, and we're going to talk about what's holding us back. Are you ready to jump into it?
Let's do it.
You build procurement functions in many organizations, but before moving into finance. So first thing I want to ask about, what do you see differently between procurement and finance, and how do you think about it differently now that you're in finance?
It's a great question. And you think about procurement, you often think about savings and looking backwards in measurement. And with finance, you often look forward. You're forecasting, you're planning, you're thinking about cash, you're thinking about margins. And so the two often are speaking different languages. What I think can be really interesting is if procurement can shift into kind of being able to help with the predictability of finance. And so as they plan and forecast, how do we make sure we understand where our contracts are, what's coming up for renewal, where there are opportunities for cost savings, where we may be investing more in the business, and actually providing some insights into the finance organization.
And do you find yourself in the past, like when you were in procurement, how much time did you spend with finance?
It's interesting. In different cases, spent less time, and then in other cases, spent more. I'll give the example at Anaplan, where we were a planning company, and so we needed to make sure our forecasting was really accurate. And procurement suddenly became a really great resource for the finance team.
That makes sense.
Because you were able to give the information and say, hey, these are the things coming up for renewal. This is how we can plan for it. In other companies, it was really focused on savings and dollars and margins. And so a little bit less time with the finance team directly.
Well, I think you kind of teed me up for the next question, because ultimately I'm going to ask, like, what changes in a company when procurement and finance are lockstep together?
I think the intersection of finance and procurement can really lend itself to the business running more efficiently. I think it can really be an unlock for the teams to move faster. In today's world, we're trying to figure out how to actually speed up, in some cases, speed up our spend. We need to figure out how to get ahead of it and make sure that we facilitate the business to move faster and not slow the business down. I think procurement in the past often had a lot of gates, a lot of restrictions, and a lot of kind of tempered the business or put the brakes on the business. And I think that finance can partner with procurement to really help accelerate and make sure that the investments are made in wise ways.
How often should those meetings happen?
I mean, as often as the partnerships need to make it happen. I
But
think
like the cadence, is it like weekly syncs? You think quarterly syncs, monthly syncs?
No, I think usually the finance team is reforecasting on a quarterly basis. So I think at a minimum, being in the room for those conversations and making sure that the data is there. Ultimately, with the right systems and the right data foundationally, the finance team should always have that information at their fingertips and be able to come for support at a more quarterly basis.
Let's talk about AI and what's actually showing up in procurement. So what do procurement teams expect from their software today?
Procurement teams expect and should expect their software to all talk to each other. I think the biggest disconnect that we find is when your invoicing is happening in a different place than your ERP and your accounting system, and a different place than your contracts and your legal team repository. I think we've all felt the pains of that. I think what's so fun about this kind of moment in time with AI is that the systems can actually be connected, and the data at a foundation in the right space can be useful across the board.
How are you and your teams actually using AI in your everyday?
I use AI constantly, which I feel like everybody is saying at this point. But if I think about what project work I actually do, I mean, doing the research, I use AI for that. But I think that's a starting point for AI. I think the bigger place that I'm finding it helpful is when I have cowork or something of that nature drafts emails for me. It's in my draft folder in my Gmail. And then at that point, all I'm doing is just double checking and hitting
a
send.
lot of folks aren't utilizing skills yet. The ability to build skills and actually do things in a really repeatable way.
100%. We train other people within our team. So we have skills that have been developed and we share across the team, whether it's working on our forecasting and our spend analytics, things like that.
Prompt sharing is caring is what I always say.
Okay, Stan, let's switch gears a little bit. I have a question for you. Procurement teams are so often still measured by how much money they save. Is that the right metric, or is that holding the function back?
Here's the reality. I don't think that metric is going away. So when you look at outcomes, right, and when you look at the function, there's outcomes that need to happen. And part of the reasons why the ROI around the function savings is part of that. I also think risk mitigation, there's going to be different ways on how the top level outcomes will always be measured. And every company's got their own view. What I do think that will be changed functionally over is how those outcomes get delivered. And that's going to be the underlying metric that I think we're going to have to change and think about. I think one of the things as procurement has grown, like spend under management grows, your headcount grows. And those are common metrics that you start measuring with how the outcome is produced. I think we have to rethink this. We talk about this all the time, new world, old world. The new world, the outcomes are going to be delivered differently. You're just going to look at efficiency. You're going to look at automation, and you're going to have to report on it. I was able to do this with these types of solutions. I was able to create these number of agents, and these how much of these agents were utilized over a period of time. You are going to have to go through and train up a set of individuals to become different users of the technology stack, which will yield to the outcome. It could be savings. It could be just purely spend under management. It could be compliance. I don't think that's going to change, but I genuinely think how we get to those outcomes has to change.
Absolutely. And I think there's a level of the business is being expected to do so much more, move so much faster. And procurement can really, with the right outcomes mentality and the right way of thinking how we're going to shift our work, it's going to be helpful in that.
Okay, I'm going to flip it on you now because you went from practitioner to now you're on the supplier side of the house working with us. Like, what's something suppliers are getting wrong about procurement needs today?
Oh man, this one is an interesting one because I think there are so many suppliers that are out there, and ultimately it's so hard to choose kind of between the different suppliers. I think that that's a great kind of thought experiment. But I think really ultimately it's not giving the context across the board of all of the data. And so if we silo our business too much, then we don't get the advantages of being able to kind of work across and have agents actually action within the platform. So I think that's where vendors or systems are not getting it right. And I think there's an opportunity, if set up in the right way with the right architecture, unleash a ton of potential for work to be automated and done for us.
Last question for me. If a procurement leader's watching this, what's one thing that you would want them to invest in if they had budget right away and why?
Is it a silly answer to say level path?
I mean, that's the right answer, but that's not, I think, what they want to hear right now.
I think it's really shoring up the architecture. So, like I was talking about, making sure that you actually have data insights that you can glean and that you can kind of have doing work for you. And so, I would say cleaning up the underlying data and information so that you actually do have insights that you can share, whatever that looks like, whether it's your contract repository or spend repository, like understanding at a foundational level where your information is. I'll flip it to you, Stan. Where do you think?
Um, I think, look, context and data is critical when you think about because we talk a lot about AI. I think one of the things right now that I'm really excited about, it's actually training. I think one of the things is training up your team and two things. One, it's dollars, but then time.
Yeah.
I think time's the hardest one because I think you'll be able to find a few dollars, but it's more just the training of taking the time to go through and let individuals learn how to use the AI tools to do their things. Because a lot of the times you just hear you're in a rat race every single day and you just don't have the time to go get stuff to automate things, to teach it skills, to share skills, and to understand how to prompt, how to use AI to do some of these things. Once you do, there's no going back because then it's rewiring how we think about the world that requires upleveling, which is why the agent ops role is going to be a real tangible thing, I think, before the end of the year.
It has been really fun to hear customers who have gone through this, where you get a customer going with one agent in our orchestration studio,
And
they don't stop. They have ideas, and they start with one task, and they just keep going, which is cool.
But you got to start.
Yeah,
And I think that's
definitely.
half the battle.
Yeah.
So that I would say is one of the things to invest in right out of the gate. Thank you so much, Sarah. That was wonderful. You can find Levelpath on LinkedIn and YouTube for way more procurement content.